You bought that tractor, every bolt of it, $200,000, maybe more. And last spring, when a sensor the size of your thumb failed, that machine sat dead in the field while the corn planting window closed around you. You called the dealer. They said 48 hours, minimum. They said the part was cheap, but the unlock was not. And you stood there in your own field, on your own iron, locked out like a trespasser. Here is what I know that most people don't. That lock was not an accident. It was designed, it was sold, and it was blessed by the very people who were supposed to protect you. I know because I helped sell it to you. I spent years inside a green dealership. I wore the badge. I signed the invoices. I told farmers the software was there to help them. I want to tell you the moment I stopped believing that, and it happened at a service counter in the middle of a July heat wave. Before we're done, I'm going to show you a federal lawsuit filed on January 15th, 2025, that says out loud what I was told to never say. And I'm going to give you something better than a lawsuit. A move you can make this week, on the machine you already own, to take back control the contract quietly stole from you. This is not for the next tractor you might buy. This is for the one sitting in your shed right now. Let me take you back to that service counter. A man I'd known for years came in. He farmed about 2,000 acres north of us, third generation, the kind of customer we called loyal. His combine had thrown an error code in the middle of wheat harvest, not a broken part, a code. The machine ran fine. It just decided it wouldn't run until a technician with a laptop came out and told it that it was allowed to. He asked me a simple question. He asked why he couldn't just clear it himself. He'd been fixing his own equipment for 40 years, and I gave him the line I'd been trained to give. I said it was for emissions compliance, for his own protection, for the warranty. He looked at me the way you look at a man you've caught in a lie. And he was right to, because the truth was, we billed him $180 an hour for a truck to drive out and plug in a cable. The truth was, that cable existed. The software existed. He just wasn't allowed to have it. That was the first layer. Somebody was profiting from his trust. And at that point, I still thought it was just business. But then I started paying attention to the numbers, and the numbers told a different story. Here is what almost no farmer understands about the machine he bought. The tractor is not where the real money lives anymore. When the big equipment makers report their earnings, the profit margin on selling you a new tractor is one thing. The profit margin on parts and service is far richer. Analysts have pointed out for years that the aftermarket, the repairs, the parts, the service calls is where the fat margins hide. Some estimates put the parts and service margin at 3 to 4 times the margin on the whole machine. Think about what that means. If you sell tractors, every tractor you sell is a customer you can bill for the next 15 years. Every repair that has to run through your service department is money that can only flow one direction, toward the dealer, toward the manufacturer, never toward the independent shop down the road, never toward the farmer with a wrench and a shop manual. So the incentive was never to build a machine you could fix. The incentive was to build a machine that had to come back. And software made that possible in a way that steel never could. An old tractor is honest. If a part breaks, you replace the part and it runs. There's no gatekeeper, but a modern machine runs on controllers, and those controllers talk to each other, and when you swap a part, the machine wants that new part to be authorized, not installed, authorized. And the only tool that can authorize it is a piece of dealer software. Inside the green world, that tool is called Service Advisor. It's the diagnostic and calibration software the technicians use. For years, farmers were told they couldn't have it. Not that it cost too much, that they simply could not have it at any price. The full version, the one that can actually complete a repair and clear the payload, lived behind the dealer wall. I watched what that did to men. I watched a farmer haul a broken machine 40 miles on a trailer during planting because the repair itself was simple, but the final unlock was not. I watched us charge for the trip, the labor, the software connection, and the part he could have bought anywhere. That's the part they never wanted you to see clearly. Therefore, when you understand that the money is in the lock and not the steel, everything the company does starts to make a terrible kind of sense. And that's when I found out how far up it went. But it isn't. It's a system, and the system had paperwork. Let me tell you about a document most farmers have never read. signed on January 8, 2023. It was a memorandum of understanding between John Deere and the American Farm Bureau Federation. It was announced with handshakes and press releases. It was sold to farmers as a victory. Right to repair. Finally, they said. The company promised to give farmers and independent shops access to tools, manuals, and diagnostics. Sounds good, right? I thought so too at first. I remember the mood in the dealership when it came down. Relief, like the pressure was off. Then I read what the Farm Bureau agreed to give in return. In exchange for that promise, the Farm Bureau agreed to encourage state farm bureaus to refrain from introducing or supporting right to repair legislation. Read that again slowly. The largest farm organization in the country agreed to stand down on the laws that would have made repair access mandatory in exchange for a voluntary promise the company could interpret however it wanted. And the memorandum had a line in it that told you everything. It said nothing in the agreement required the manufacturer to divulge trade secrets or to allow farmers to override safety controls or emissions controls, which is to say, all the locks that actually mattered stayed exactly where they were. The company kept the keys. It just got a signed piece of paper it could wave around every time a state tried to pass a real law. I sat with that. I'd spent years telling customers the company was on their side. And here was the proof, in writing, that the deal wasn't repair access. The deal was to make the pressure go away without giving up the lock. Somebody wrote those terms, and somebody the farmers trusted signed them. That was the layer that broke me. This wasn't a dealer making a buck. This was the architecture. They wrote the terms, and they funded the peace, and the people who were supposed to fight for you agreed to stop fighting. But here's what the company didn't count on. Farmers are stubborn, and the government was watching. Because a voluntary promise is only worth something if someone can force you to keep it. And on January 15, 2025, someone finally tried. The Federal Trade Commission, joined by the Attorneys General of Illinois and Minnesota, filed a lawsuit against Deere and Company. Not a complaint, a federal antitrust lawsuit. And the language in it is the language I was never allowed to use out loud. The complaint alleges that for decades, the company drove up equipment repair costs for farmers by keeping the fully functional repair tool, the software needed to complete many repairs, out of the hands of farmers and independent technicians. It alleges that this forced farmers into the company's own dealer network, a network the complaint describes as controlled, where the company could keep repair prices high and keep competition out. The government's filing put a name to the thing I watched every day. It said the setup let dealers charge whatever the market would bear, because there was no market. Where else were you going to go? The independent mechanic couldn't finish the job. The neighbor with the same model couldn't finish the job. Only the green laptop could finish the job, and the green laptop only came with the green truck and the green invoice. Now, the company has pushed back. It called the lawsuit meritless. It pointed to that memorandum and said it had already committed to expanding access. It said it had released a version of a customer tool, and I want to be fair about that, because being fair is how you know I'm telling you the truth. There is a customer-facing version of the software now. You can buy it, but here's the catch I learned from the inside, and it's the catch the lawsuit circles around. The tool the customer can get and the tool the technician uses have not always been the same tool. The functions that actually matter, the ones that clear certain codes and authorize certain new parts and complete certain calibrations, those were the crown jewels. And a promise to give you a screwdriver means nothing if they keep the one wrench that turns the last bolt. So partially, the tension resolves. You finally understand why your bill is what it is. It was built that way, on purpose. And now the federal government agrees. But understanding why you're trapped doesn't get you out of the trap. And if you already own one of these machines, you're sitting there thinking this lawsuit could take years, and your planter is still going to break next April. Before I show you how far up this really went, I want to hand you something you can hold on to. Picture yourself again in that field. The sun dropping, the planter dead, and a dealer telling you 48 hours while the window closes. That helpless feeling is exactly what I set out to kill permanently in a book called The Complete Iron Furrow System. It's a digital field manual you can download tonight. It exposes what your ownership agreement actually lets Deere control. and it lays out 5 real cash recovery moves ranked by return and by the honest effort each one takes. It gives you a 12-month map from the shock of that invoice to running independent, so you stop renting the machine you already paid for. And here's a test you can run for free before you spend a dime on anything. Tonight, go read the Colorado Agricultural Right to Repair Law by name, then look at the manufacturer's own repair portal and see that the tools they swore were impossible are now documented in public. That one check proves the door is already open. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And the reason to do this now is simple. That planter is going to break next spring whether the lawsuit is settled or not, and the money is bleeding out of your pocket every service call in the meantime. Now back to that paperwork, because if this were just greedy dealers, you could shop around. So let me talk to you directly now. The man who already owns the locked machine. This next part is for you, and it's the part I most wish someone had told my customers before they drove off my lot. You are not as trapped as they need you to feel. The first thing you need to understand is that the fear is doing half the work. The company doesn't need to lock every function. It just needs you to believe that touching your own machine will void something, brick something, or land you in trouble. That fear kept dozens of my customers from ever trying. So let me give you concrete ground to stand on. Start with the manuals. For years, operators believed technical service manuals were secret. They are not. The company sells technical and service manuals, and you can buy the technical manual for many models directly. That book contains the diagnostic procedures, the wiring diagrams, the fault code meanings, the specifications. That is the same reference the technician opens. Buying the manual for your specific model is the cheapest independence you will ever purchase, and most owners never do it. Second, know your model year, because the year is everything. The machines built before the heavy controller integration are golden. If your tractor predates the emissions-driven electronic era, roughly the machines from before the late 2000s, most of what breaks is mechanical and hydraulic and fully within your reach. That's not nostalgia, that's engineering fact. An older mechanical machine has no gate to lock, and that leads to the move that a whole quiet movement of farmers has already made, and it's the one the company hates most. They started buying the old iron back on purpose. I watched this happen at auctions before I understood what I was seeing. A clean, low-hour tractor from the late 1970s or the early 1980s, a simple mechanical machine with no emissions, computer, and no controller lock, started selling for money that made no sense to me at the time. I saw older tractors bring premium prices while newer, more powerful, more complex machines sat. I thought buyers were being sentimental. They weren't. They were being smart. They were buying a machine they were legally and physically allowed to fix forever, with no dealer standing between them and their own field. There was an auction that got written up a few years back where a 1980s model, a simple workhorse, sold for a figure that rivaled newer equipment, and reporters treated it like a curiosity. To me, it read like a verdict. Farmers were voting with cash. They would rather own an old machine outright than rent a new one from the software. So if you feel trapped, here is your concrete ladder, and you can start this week. Buy the technical manual for the exact machine you own. Find and join the online owner communities for your model, where farmers post the actual fixes, the actual workarounds, the actual part numbers, because those forums are the free apprenticeship the dealer never offered you. Build a relationship with an independent mechanic now, before harvest, not during it. And for the jobs where the software lock genuinely blocks you, know that there is a growing market of third-party diagnostic tools and reflashing services. And yes, some farmers have turned to unofficial software passed hand to hand because a man will do what he has to do to save his own crop. I'm not here to tell you to break a law. I'm here to tell you that the helplessness they sold you was the biggest lie in the brochure. You have more control than they ever let you feel. But there's one more layer, and it's the one that finally made me walk out for good, because taking back your old iron is a defensive move, and some farmers stopped playing defense entirely. They looked across the ocean, and what they found over there embarrassed everything I'd been selling over here. Let me be careful and honest. Because European machines have emissions, computers too. They are not magic. But there's a difference in philosophy that shows up in the ownership. Several of the European and independent-minded manufacturers built their reputations on a machine a farmer or a local dealer could actually service. With wider access to diagnostics and a dealer culture that historically leaned less on the software chokehold, farmers who made the jump told me the same thing over and over. It wasn't that the new machine never broke, it was that when it broke, they weren't treated like a suspect. I watched customers I'd had for a decade start asking about the red and the other colors, the ones from across the water, and about the independent brands that never built the lock into their business model. And I couldn't give them a good reason to stay. That's a hard thing for a salesman to admit. When the only argument you have left for your own product is the color and the habit, you already know you've lost. So partially, you can breathe. Whether you keep your old iron or look at the alternatives, you are not out of options. But I promised you something at the start, something better than a lawsuit, something you can act on this week that most farmers have never heard spelled out plainly. And to give it to you, I have to take you to the one place the company most wanted you to never look. Here is the secret I dug out, and it did not come from a rumor, it came from the public record. When the state of Colorado did what the Farm Bureau agreed to help prevent, it passed a real agricultural right to repair law. It was signed in the spring of 2023, and it took effect on January 1st, 2024. It was the first law of its kind in the nation, aimed squarely at farm equipment, and that law did something the memorandum never did. It didn't ask the company to be nice. It required the company to provide farmers and independent shops with the same manuals, tools, parts, and software the dealers get on fair and reasonable terms. Now here's the part almost nobody connected. Once a manufacturer builds a compliant resource portal to satisfy a law in one state, that resource does not stop at the state line. The manuals exist. The parts catalogs exist. The diagnostic access built to satisfy the law is documented in public. When you go looking for how to legally get dealer-level access, you are no longer arguing about whether it exists. A state law proved it exists and forced it into daylight. The company can no longer tell you it's impossible, because it filed the paperwork saying it's possible. And it didn't stop with one state. Following Colorado, the pressure spread. More states moved bills. And the biggest tell of all is this. The federal lawsuit from January of 2025 specifically asked the court to force the company to make the full repair resources available to equipment owners and independent shops, not voluntarily, by order. So here's your move this week, the simple one. Go find the Colorado Agricultural Right to Repair Law by name. Read what the manufacturer is now required to provide. Then look at the manufacturer's own repair resource and customer portal and ask for the exact tools and documentation that law requires them to offer. When you ask as an informed owner who knows the resource already exists because a state forced it into existence, you are a completely different customer than the beaten-down farmer at my counter who thought the software was a locked vault. The vault has a published door now. Somebody in Colorado kept this fight alive long enough to build that door. Most owners just never learned it was there. That's the thing they never wanted you to have, not the tool. The knowledge that the tool must be given to you, because a farmer who knows his rights doesn't pay $180 an hour for a truck to drive out and plug in a cable he could plug in himself. I think about that man at my service counter more than I like to admit. The one who asked me why he couldn't clear his own code, I gave him the company line. If he walked in today, I'd hand him the name of a state law and tell him to stop asking permission and start demanding what he's owed. You bought the machine, every bolt of it, and somewhere along the way they convinced you that owning it and controlling it were two different things. They are not. That was the lie. Taking back the wrench is taking back the farm. You're the kind of man who fixes what he owns. That's not stubbornness. That's the whole reason you got into this life, to answer to your land and your weather and nobody else's invoice. Don't let a piece of software turn you into a renter on your own ground. So tell me one thing, and be specific, because I read these. What's the worst repair invoice a dealer ever handed you, and what was the actual part that broke? Put the machine, the model, and the number in the comments right now. I want to see it, and so does every other owner scrolling past who thinks he's the only one. Name your iron. Name the bill. And if you're done renting what you already paid for, come with me. This channel is for owners taking their iron back, one machine at a time. Next, I'm pulling apart the exact list of tractor model years that have no controller lock at all, the ones you can still buy and fix forever, and the one popular model everyone recommends that will trap you the moment the warranty ends. You won't want to guess wrong on that one. Stay with me. You just watched the overview, but there's more. Inside the right to repair, I take you to the service counter unlock, right where we stopped. You can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself, not a bot. And you're not alone. Farmers like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen, cancel anytime with one click. No risk. Now, if this fight worries you, there's something bigger you need to see. John Deere is quietly making the very same mistake that once brought Caterpillar to its knees. That story starts right here.